All right, we're going to show 3 exercises today for hip impingement. I'm Sebastian and this is Mandy.
Hi.
She's going to help us out with the exercise demonstration today. Before we start with the 3 exercises, we want to first talk about the region we're talking about, just so you make sure that you're on the right video. Mandy, can you show them everyone where hip impingement may start?
Yeah, so we're usually talking about this area. Feel kind of pinchy. Sometimes we're traveling a little bit south, but we're never behind. So hip impingement always in the front, just below the point of your hip.
Now, sometimes if you have problems behind into the gluteal region, the SI joint, or the low back, you may have other movement compensations creating those problems too. We can help you with that as well. Before we go on to the 3 exercises, just know that if you're looking for more information about this, we do have videos on YouTube. You can subscribe to the channel. We have literally almost 1,000 videos on topics just like this. So subscribe to the channel. All right, we're just going to get into the exercises now. So we're first going to start with stretching a hip flexor. Many of you have tried that before, so Mandy's going to show us a version that works. Go ahead and show everybody what you got, and we're going to put a little bit of a different spin on this too, versus the versions you may have seen.
So we're usually like this.
Yeah.
Rocking forward.
So how do you take any breaks? Do you just keep going through it? How does it go?
I tend to rock in and out, kind of pause for a second right at the bottom here, really get a good stretch here. And then come out a little bit and go back and forth.
Now, show everybody maybe something that people do often on accident, but they don't know it, where they get less stretch out of their hip flexor by doing this.
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of people, especially when we're really tight in this area, they kind of lean back instead of actually going forward. So act like you got maybe a stick in the front of your hip and you're trying to poke that stick in front of you.
Right. Another thing they do too is they open their hips, so if all you can see her belt buckle now, you don't want to see her belt buckle. And even if that means she's going through less range, that's okay, because she's going through the range that her hip flexor has. Also, if any of these bother you, you can keep going through the exercise too. If any of these bother you beyond like a couple reps, this is not something you should necessarily be doing. It's just something that works for a lot of people, but we do have other exercises and stretches that we customize things for people. Now, if we make this into an exercise now, we can make it a little bit more effortful. Go ahead and rock in a little bit more to me. There you go. You contract your butt cheek really hard. There you go. You'll notice it starts to focalize things right into this region. And go ahead and back out again and go again. So maybe hold for about 5 seconds or so. And then rock out. If you do it in this mannerism, there's a concept called reciprocal inhibition, which if you contract the glute, it helps to reduce the tension on the hip flexor and helps keep the range a little bit better. Great. Let's go into, do you want to teach a abdominal wall priming one for me?
I think most people like, we've talked about dead bugs before. A lot of runners like doing that, so maybe we'll modify that a little bit.
Okay.
So dead bug, usually we're on our back and people kind of
Scooch a little bit to me, just so everyone can see your lower back too. Okay, go ahead.
And we look like this, like a dead bug, right? And some people will just kind of tap and do nothing and you don't feel it anywhere. But how would we make this hard?
So first we got to start with, probably we can prime the abdominal wall first, because once you stretch the hip flexor, priming the abdominal wall is probably the second part. In order to do that, you can use your hands and knees as the weight stack, okay? And so because people with hip impingement don't like this closed knee position, I know you can't see it with Mandy, but her knees are directly touching. And so she's going to spread them out a little bit, bring this up a little bit so she can see her toe-nail polish. Yep. Sparkly. Good. Put both palms of your hands onto your quads. You're more literal. Most people would have taken it. So right here is good. Okay. Now can you start pushing them together? Under no circumstances should anything move. It's like we took a time-lapse video of you doing this exercise and we're like, she didn't do anything. Okay. So ramp in, push, 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 push. Ramp out, push, push, or less push, 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 ramp in. So there's never a time where you're not doing any effort. You're doing higher effort and lower effort. Okay? What some of you may notice is that you may feel that your lower back arches off the floor. Don't let it. Okay, that's good. So show that one more time, Mandy.
Might go up here like this.
Yeah, so they get
flatten it.
Yeah, so we want to eliminate that. The reason being is because that's just going to tighten your hip flexor more, and it's going to make your hip hurt even more. And so Under no circumstance should that happen. Also, people tend to stop breathing.
Yep.
Like you should hear Mandy in the microphone. It's like she had her first cup of coffee in the morning, first sip. Okay? And go and relax. So I'm going to give her a break here. I'm going to act like I'm a chair or a wall. And then she's going to go back and do it again. Now, this may be hard for a lot of you. For people who are novice, obviously take your breaks when you need to, but don't take too long of a break, maybe 5 seconds. But for someone like her who's been doing this for a while, you can see on her face there's no wrinkles forming in her face. So we can challenge it a little bit more if you want to. Push harder.
Sure.
Push harder. Push harder. She's shaking now. Can you say, So she's shaking now. And then relax 5 seconds and then go again. Ideally, we want the abdominal wall to become tired, not the rest of the body first. Not the hip flexor first. Is that what you're feeling?
I'm feeling both abdominals and hip flexors.
Okay. So for Mandy, we may need to change the knee position a little bit, or we need to change the break time. Go ahead and relax. She's been in this position for a pretty long time. Now the third exercise we're going to do is to strengthen the hip flexion pattern. Not the hip flexor, the hip flexion pattern. The fact of the matter is most people's hip flexors are way too strong anyways. It's overbearing, and you see on that last exercise, go ahead and push again. So if she pushes here and the hip flexors are winning, it'll make her extend her low back, and they're winning. And go ahead and relax. So usually the abdominal wall and other things they're losing. They're just not helping out in the matter. So rather than thinking strengthen your hip flexor, think strengthen your hip flexion pattern. And you may do that in a very mundane, boring way like we're going to do today, but it shouldn't feel really hard. Okay. In order to do this, go ahead and go fingers on relax that down. There we go. And go right there. So she's going to pinch herself. There you go. And make it so your fingers win first. There you go. Everyone can probably see that you can see this divot in her stomach here, maybe. Profile view anyways. And so now she's going to fight back with her guts. What this does is it aligns the diaphragm and the pelvic diaphragm, and it makes it so the pressure forms in the entire cavity. What this does from a perspective of the pelvis is it helps rotate the pelvis a little bit, and it keeps the hip flexor doesn't win all the time, but also decreases the amount of impingement that you get on the femur to the pelvis. Okay, so hold that pressure. I want you to see how far you can get your knee to my hand. One knee. There you go, and return. Other knee. So she tried both knees at one time. Not a bad thing, but harder. When you first started doing it, you looked like you were shaking. Okay, this should feel kind of boring.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, that's okay. The fact of the matter is a lot of people with hip impingement have pain with flexing their hip. Ideally, you want to make it so the body restores a good movement pattern, so hip flexion, even deep hip flexion, does not become painful. And then you can start challenging it with things like running and weightlifting and so on. How long do you think you would like them to do this?
Like them to do it maybe a couple minutes at a time, but the whole time we're focusing on pushing those fingers out of your guts. So the minute you start losing that, take a break, a couple seconds, then go back into it.
Yeah, I notice that when I've done one like this for myself, like if someone's talking to me or if I'm thinking about what's on my phone, I've lost focus on this. And so if you're not focusing on actually almost visualizing your fingers spreading with each breath, almost getting very woo-woo, you know, don't even worry about the knees too much and how far they go. It's just how much pressure can you put into all 4 points of your fingers as you breathe. If you don't focus on that, then you're probably focusing on something else. Okay? Go ahead and sit up for me. Now, if you guys are looking for help with this, we've seen a lot of people with hip flexor problems before. We did create a free webinar too. It's going to pop up in the corner. I do suggest that you get it. It covers hip flexor as well as sports hernias, hip impingement, cam deformities, pincers, labral tears, and so many different types. And so the fact is a lot of times people have a lot of questions about what they have, what their diagnosis is, and so on. So we cover it all in there. We cover some of the more exercises in this one. So if you guys are looking for help, we're in Costa Mesa, California. Our link is in the description below. Subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time.